Do you love beautiful, effortless looking watercolor backgrounds where the colors just flow, but you find yourself struggling to actually make them? If so, this is the video for you. Hi, my name is Cassie. I'm with LDRS Creative. Today I want to show you a really easy way to make beautiful backgrounds using watercolor pigment powders. I will be using the Lindy's Magical powders, but there are other brands like Brusho and Color Bursts. This is just what I have in my studio. But before we can go any further, I am putting on gloves. These pigment powders will stain your clothing and your hands. So if you don't want colorful hands, put on a pair of gloves. Now that I have gloves on, let's take a look at what these pigment powders are. They come in these cute little jars, and it may not seem like there's very much, but a little goes a really long way with these. And what they are these powdered pigments. These particular ones come in a shaker jar, so it's kind of like a salt shaker. Other ones, you have to poke a hole in the lid. It just kind of depends on the brand that you're using. These are water reactive, so we are going to be working on watercolor paper. This is the LDRS Creative Watercolor paper, and it is a great surface for these powdered pigments. To start out, I'm just going to gently tap a little bit of this powdered pigment onto my paper, kind of going in a diagonal direction just to give it a little bit of design, but it will move with the water. Like I said before, a little goes a long way, so you don't need much. Now that we have pigment on our paper, we need to activate it with some water. I like to do that with a spray bottle. So I'm just going to go ahead and start spritzing the color. And you can see that as soon as that pigment touches water, it just explodes into a colorful burst. The more water you add, the more it will dissolve and blend together. Now, because these are individual particles of pigment, there are different colors in any given jar, so you get little pops of yellow mixed in with that pink. While your pigment is wet, you can manipulate it with your fingers, with tilting your page. You can dab it up with a paper towel. You can kind of manipulate it and play with it. Every time you do this, it will be different, but look how quick and easy it was to create a beautiful, multicolored watercolor background with just one jar of pigment powder. I'm just using a paper towel to dab up some of the bigger pools of water. The other thing you can do with these pigment powders is you can add them directly to wet paper. So if there's an area you want a little bit darker, you can go ahead and just sprinkle on a little bit more powder. When you're happy, go ahead and set it aside to dry, or use your heat gun to dry it. And just like that, you have a beautiful, dreamy watercolor background that was super simple to make. Now, if you want to step this technique up just a bit without making it any more difficult, you are going to love the new liquid marble background stamp from LDRS Creative. Now I'm going to show you the lazy way of using background stamps. And we're just going to peel off the protective acetate off of the stamp, but we're going to leave it on the backer sheet. So the part that has the printed design on it, we're just leaving that where it is. I'm just going to lay that down on my table. Because we don't need to worry about perfection for this technique, you don't need to put it in a MISTI or anything like that. What we are going to do is ink up the stamp really well with a clear embossing ink. I'm using the watermark pad from LDRS Creative. Then lay your watercolor paper on top of the stamp very carefully and use the heel of your hand to press firmly against the stamp. Now you want to make sure that you always have one hand holding the paper still while the other hand is moving. Don't move both hands at the same time or your paper will shift. Once you've stamped your image, we're going to cover it with some clear or white embossing powder. So I'm just going to shake that on and then shake the excess back off onto just a coffee filter so that I can pour it back into the jar and use it for my next project. You want to make sure that your whole image is nice and covered with the powder. I like to clean up the powder right away so I don't spill it. Ask me how I know. Then we are going to take our heat gun and we are going to heat our embossing powder. You want to make sure that you're carefully watching so that as soon as it turns shiny, you move on to a new area. So just going to keep that heat gun moving until we have the entire image embossed. Just going to do a quick double check to make sure that all the image is shiny and I didn't miss any spots. All right, when you are happy with your embossing, it is time to grab our powdered pigments. We are going to do the same thing that we did with our last background and just gently tap some color onto your paper. For this one, I'm using two colors. I'm using a turquoise and a purple. I'm not worrying where my lines are on my stamped image or anything like that. I am trying to kind of keep a little bit of spacing between the colors, so you'll have a pocket of turquoise and a pocket of purple, but you can do it how you want. Now we're going to go ahead and spray it with our water bottle. Now, our embossed lines are going to act as a resist. So the pigment isn't going to go where your lines are, but it also creates wells where the color can pool and really mix, so you get a lot of variations in your colors. Just like before, you can tilt your paper to kind of help encourage the running of colors. You can also use a paper towel to dab up any extra water if the pools get too big and out of control. You can also use your finger to move some of the pigment into spots that didn't get any color or didn't get dark enough color. So I'm just touching different colors into the lighter areas of the design. When you're happy with it, go ahead and set it aside to dry. Because we have embossing on there, you don't want to use a heat gun because you might remelt the embossing powder. I like to make several of these at the same time, so at this point I would put it aside to dry and I would start doing my next color. So by the time I'm finished with all of my colors, my first one is dry. Now that our background is dry, we can turn it into a card. I'm taking this A2 stitched layer topper from LDRS Creative, and I'm going to use the middle rectangle and die cut my watercolor panel. Isn't it gorgeous? I absolutely love this stamp for this technique. Now you can use other stamps too, but this one is just so perfect for it. Keeping this card nice and simple, I've gone ahead and stamped my sentiment from sending my love onto some white paper and die cut it with the rounded rectangle frames. I used Tropical Sea and Boysenberry Blast for my colors. I inked up my stamp first with Tropical Sea and then just kind of dabbed on a little bit of the Boysenberry Blast on the bottom for that two-tone stamping effect. Because our background is a little bit busy, I want to put something behind our sentiment just to help it stand out. So I'm going to go ahead and layer up some teal paper on top of some white paper. I purposely left my strip longer than I need it because I want to add just a little bit of texture to this by running it through a crimper. So I'm just going to put my strip in there and twist the little handle. This just adds a little bit of cool texture to the card. I'm going to grab an A2 card base and we are ready to start assembling our card. I'm going to start by putting some adhesive on the back of our watercolored panel. I like to use a dry adhesive and a wet adhesive. It seems to hold the watercolor paper really well, even if it's a little bit warped from all the water. And I'm going to attach that directly to the front of the A2 card base. Give that a nice burnish with my hands just to make sure it's all attached. I'm going to use liquid adhesive on the back of our crimped paper so that I don't smash that texture trying to put dry adhesive on there. I'm just going to figure out where I want it and then just very, very gently brush that on. Then I'm going to let that dry. While the glue is drying on that, we can add some foam adhesive behind our sentiment to give that just a little bit of extra pop. Then I'll pull off the release paper and press that in place. Once everything is nice and situated, you can go ahead and open your card up and just use a pair of scissors to trim off any of the overhanging strip. And here is our finished card. I absolutely love how quick easy and fun these backgrounds are. They make such bright, colorful cards, and it is so simple. I hope this inspires you to give it a try, either with this stamp or with a different LDRS Creative background stamp. If you do, make sure you share with us in the LDRS Creative Facebook group. We love seeing your work. If you have any watercolor questions, be sure to leave it in the comments below, or you can ask it in the Facebook group. Just be sure to tag me so I will see it and be able to help you out. I hope you have an absolutely fantastically creative day, and I'll see you soon.